Hello, Ken. How are you this fantastic afternoon? This is the trend, afternoons.
I'm doing great, Dan. How are you on this fine day?
I am excellent. I am seeing some rain outside of my windows right now
Wow.
because in the south of where I am, I'm on the East Coast, we had a significant hurricane, Hurricane Ian. So if this is in the historical record, which it will be, probably in the Library of Congress, we will be able to look back on this and remember when this was, because this was October 2nd. Happens to also be my mom's 74th birthday. Happy birthday, Mom.
Happy birthday, Mom. And Dan, I don't know if you're aware or not, but you are being watched. What's that all about?
Oh my goodness. Am I really? Oh,
Yeah.
so that is our topic, Ken. And we are switching it up because I'm normally asking you what it's all about. And today you're asking me what this is all about. And what this topic is all about is the things that we do in our lives that we do because other people we least perceive or believe that they are watching us, that they're paying attention, that they're noticing, things like that. So when I think about this topic, um, first came to mind came from a really dark place, which was I happened to be watching the Dahmer show that's on Netflix, and I was thinking about the fact that he had said if nobody had ever like noticed, he would have just kept on going, right, with this terrible, disgusting thing of murdering people and what he did after the fact. And I was thinking about that for both good and bad habits of people. There are things that we do, and I wonder, I even have to ask myself, like, do I do that because somebody's will notice if I don't do it, right? Or somebody's helping me keep track of doing it. So there's so many activities or actions that we take in our lives. And the real question is, are we doing it because we believe or perceive we're being watched?
There's an interesting thought around this, and that is a good deed intrinsically a good deed, or is it a good deed only when somebody else is observing it? It's kind of like if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, does it still make a sound? If a good deed is done and there's no one there to acknowledge you for it, was it still a good deed? And I would say 100% yes, it was still a good deed. And there have been several studies done on this. And I think people who are listening are familiar with the term humble brag, but the sort of false humility that goes along with broadcasting the good deeds that you've done in such a way to draw attention to yourself. And the thing that is fascinating about it is that when people believe that what you are doing for the sake of drawing attention to yourself, it actually plays against you instead of in favor of you. If there's if there's one thing that I think annoys me more than anything on social media, and I've been spending a little bit too much time there, it is this. It's this whole notion of the humble brag, uh, where people are kind of modest, or there's almost a self-deprecating way of stating something that you're proud of for the intention of drawing attention to yourself. It's very different. Uh, instead of, it's very different to just say, I did this, this felt great, here it is, and to just be honest about it, right? It's something that you're proud about, something that you did to help others, and you want to share it and encourage them to do the same thing. That's great. But a humble brag kind of necessitates almost this false modesty. And it's that false modesty that I think is really, really troubling. So I think this subject has many different facets to it. One of them is, do you do those things when you're being watched, and do you do them for the sake of recognition? And the other thing is a good deed just simply intrinsically a good deed that you can do without any recognition whatsoever? and in so doing, actually accomplish far more.
So many of you who know me or have listened to me know that I'm a big golfer. So a couple of friends of mine will let me know about their golf rounds. So literally they'll, text me or we'll go jump on a call and they'll be like, oh, I played X course today. And they'll tell me about their round, how it went, what score they shot. And the trend that I find, which is really interesting and relates here, is that they didn't even need to tell me they played golf at all. And the reason that's relevant is because I look at the frustration sometimes with a very poor round of golf. And I ask that question of, did you play with friends? Like, who'd you play with? And a lot of times, like, no, they got matched up with people, the course, whatever. And here's the part that's interesting is, are you playing golf because you enjoy golf? Or are you playing golf? Like, this isn't a tournament that you have to like turn a scorecard or you're competing against other people. If you played golf that day, I'm not watching you play golf. I didn't even know you played golf until you decided to let me know. I also wouldn't know what the score you shot was until you tell me what the score you shot was. But it's that interesting thing of like, how many things in life do we do that we feel like we're doing it so if the end result's good, that we can be like, hey, guess what I did? And almost like show off or brag. But then the moment we've attached that meaning to it, we now have the reverse of like this feeling like disappointment or like you failed if you didn't be successful in whatever that thing that you were working on was. So there's just a lot that goes into that. But my favorite, I don't know if it's a saying, but the thing that I've come up with that I've hopefully coached people, especially a lot of my friends on, is I say, nobody's watching you. I say, nobody cares and nobody's comparing. And when you first hear that, you think that's kind of seems pessimistic or negative to say nobody's watching, nobody cares, nobody's comparing. But I say that as like a freeing statement. Go back to that thing. It's like you can live your life and realize that unless you post it on social media, unless you place that phone call or sent me that text to tell me what you're doing, you can live your life just for you or just for those close people that are associated or affected by what you're doing. The only reason you have this perception of people watching you is a lot of times because you're volunteering them to watch you. You're almost raising your hand or you're posting and saying, hey, pay attention to me, notice me, right? But if unless you do it on purpose, those are facts. People are living their independent own lives, right? We're all kind of inherently selfish. We have to be to like make this world work is we got to like check ourselves first, like put that oxygen mask on first on the plane before you can put on your child. It's like, you got to help yourself first. So unless you're trying to raise your hand or post and get noticed, nobody is watching you. And when I say nobody cares, what I mean is people care about the big picture. Like hopefully most people who are normal just care about like, life and death. They wouldn't want you to have a terminal illness. They wouldn't want something really tragic or bad to happen to you. But the day-to-day stuff, they don't really care about that, right? You try to get them to care. You try to show off sometimes, but they don't really care. The other part is they're not comparing. A lot of times I see people trying to get this attention or post because they're always making this comparison in their life of like, how does my life up stack to my friends, my peers, my colleagues, whatever. But they're not doing that. People are not going around comparing unless you're putting yourself up for comparison. So just realize that the question was like, you're being watched, or that statement or topic for today is, here's the truth. You're not being watched. To be watched, you have to volunteer to be watched. You literally have to post something somewhere, volunteer that information, tell people about what's happening. And if not, in the occasions that you catch up, you get to share exactly what you want to share and nothing more, nothing less. So here's the truth. You're not being watched.
So I think it's a great point. You've got to draw attention to yourself to be watched. And I always think, do we realize that it's the deed itself, it's the good deed that matters? Because I keep going back to this piece. Like, we're so tuned into audience, right? We're so tuned into how many views did I get? How many followers do I have? How many comments were there? What's the kind of engagement that I got? We're just like programmed to think that way, ostensibly just for like social media advertising and business growth and those kinds of things. But I think it has crawled into our way of being just as a human being. And for us, audience size now is everything. If I do a good deed and no one knows about it, did it really happen? I mean, it's that goofy joke about if you have a great meal, but you don't post it on Instagram, did you really have a great meal? Did it really happen? Yes, of course it happened, but other people didn't see it. But I think this is where we do ourselves such a huge disservice, is that good deeds, acts of kindness, acts of compassion, helping out a friend, any of those things, we associate those now with needing to have a high number of followers or a high level of attention to it before we think that they're valid. And I think, Dan, that's what's at the heart of this, from my perspective, is the validity of a good deed, the validity of an act of kindness or compassion seems to get collapsed into how many people know that you did it. And the more people that know, the more impactful the deed. And yet people have a really good BS meter, and they can sense when you're saying something or doing something for the sake of the audience, for the sake of the show, and to draw attention to yourself and to build yourself up by talking about how you've helped others. Last point on this round is that I agree with what you said. You have to draw attention to yourself for people to actually notice in most cases. But in those cases where somebody actually notices something that you've done spontaneously, like somebody you stopped to help someone, an elderly person across the street when it's a busy traffic hour, and somebody on the other side of the street says, "That was a really nice thing you did for that gentleman." Man, that's beautiful. There was nothing about that was pretentious, that was forced, that was 100% spontaneous. You happened to get some recognition, and maybe in the process of having done that, you inspired somebody else as well. So know that it is the deed itself, not the size of the audience, that brings value to your action.
When you do something and you want recognition, you want people to notice, realize that a lot of times you have to actually tell them, like I'm saying, you have to raise your hand, you have to post. This is the example I'm thinking about. I had a coaching client this past week that was mentioning the way they interact with people at their office. And they were mentioning something about the trash. That sounds funny, but the trash would pile up around like people's desks, like overflow. And he would go around and literally just be like, I'm just going to empty their trash for them, right? He didn't want to wait for the person to come in at night and do that. He's like, I'm just going to go ahead and empty their trash. Just makes the office look better, whatever. But he was saying that, like, but nobody appreciates that I do that. And it seemed important to this person that people were recognizing. And I said, nobody can recognize what they don't know, right? Unless Ken just said, they catch you in the act of doing it, right? They're not going to know. So, but it seems important to you that they do know, right? So they can appreciate it. So realize that certain things you do, if it's important to you to have appreciation, you can let people know, but let them know not in the way that you're trying to be like, hey, look at me, aren't I a great guy? You could even say something like, hey, to me, it's really important that if we have a guest or somebody comes in, that we always have a great and a really clean office. So I always make sure I notice if things are overflowing. So I noticed your trash can. I went ahead and took care of that for you. Most people who are normal and polite are going to say thank you. Here's what not to do. This comes from a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. When you do something nice and you want people to recognize you did something nice and they thank you for doing something nice, don't say no problem. Don't say don't worry about it. Don't say no big deal. Don't say any of those things, because what that does is you cared about them noticing you and appreciating you. So don't downgrade what they just thanked you for. Instead, you could say you're welcome, simple, or you can enact the law of reciprocation, which is like a mental checklist that people subconsciously keep, which you say, happy to do that for you, Ken. I know you do the same for me. Now, again, in their mind, they're like, cool, seems like a good guy, nice guy, whatever. Later, when they're in a situation, they're thinking, I could do something nice. They almost subconsciously think like, that's a nice guy who did something nice for me. And he didn't throw away that nice thing he did for me. He didn't say like, hey, no big deal, no problem, whatever. He literally said, happy to do that for you. I know you do the same for me. So in any case, when you do something and it's important to you to be appreciated for that thing you do, make sure to notify people and make sure to either just say you're welcome or enact that law of reciprocation.
You mentioned the phrase I most hate in customer service, which is no problem. Why would it be a problem? Here, it shouldn't be. It should never be a problem. I don't understand why it's no problem. But I think your point is really, really well taken, and I love saying I was happy to. My personal phrase is it was my pleasure, and and I had this happen yesterday. We were having lunch with some friends, and he was having just a rough go. One of the friends was having a rough go, and listened to him, offered him a little bit of advice after the half hour, and we're getting up to walk away, and he's like, "Thank you. I really appreciate that." And not only say it was my pleasure, but I said, "You've done the same for me, and I wanted to return this." And I think there is that wonderful sense of reciprocity that can come from good deeds, if you will. But as long as it comes from a place of true humility, not fake humility, not the, oh, it was no big deal, but that sincere sense of humility and appreciation and gratitude and love for what got done, then there's a realness to it and a genuineness to it and an authenticity to it that you can't fake. I think it does seed it too, that once you start that process, not only is this friend going to carry that forward to our next conversation, he's going to carry it forward to conversations he has with other people. I think what it does, Dan, is, and that's a great book, by the way. I think what it does is it starts to put people on notice. It actually elevates their consciousness. So they start to look for and listen for opportunities to contribute and to help because somebody contributed to them. And then that reciprocity takes on a life of its own, just like ignoring things, turning your eye, a blind eye to things, walking around the trash basket instead of emptying it, passing by a person in need instead of helping them. All of those things are self-perpetuating. And so we train ourselves and we train those around us, friends and simply observers, by our actions. And this is where I think it gets back to that sense of like your values. Those values that you have shouldn't be dependent on who's watching or not watching, or if you think you're being watched or not watched. Those values should be the irreducible minimum core of who you are as a human being. And they get carried out no matter what. Did somebody watch? Great. Did somebody not watch? Great. It doesn't matter because your values are your values and the behaviors that you associate with those values are things that get done regardless of the size of the audience.
What you're really saying is God is watching you. And whether you don't believe in God, you might believe in karma, you might believe in energetic forces that you send out to the universe, right? And they get attracted or retracted off of you. But that's really the truth. I mean, however you look at it, there's something to that, right? There's either this higher power that I believe in to be God that notices and is judging and looking at the behavior and the way you treat people. And other people just think there's that karmic belief of like you put out good and do good in the world and good comes back to you, and you put out whatever evil or negativity and negativity comes back to you. But that's how you should think about it. While it's true that people aren't really watching you and probably not paying attention to you and not even noticing you unless you're raising your hand or posting. But if you believe in something greater than just a person, then you're able to follow what Ken's trying to say is like, you have your own moral values and standards. Hopefully you do. And if you haven't, please like at least come up with a few, right? Like I'll never do this. I always do this. This matters. This doesn't matter. Come up with those for yourself and have those be your guiding principles and realize that even if nobody notices and nobody cares, there's something beyond those people that is noticing and does matter and does impact the rest of your life because of the way that you act in any moment, the decision that you make, what you move forward with. God is watching you.
Last thing I want to add in on this is that it works on the flip side as well. And I'll use the example of going to the gym because that's something that I do regularly. And on the days I'm training with my trainer, there's no escaping. I mean, it's like you're going to do X amount of things. He's going to push you through. You're going to get everything done in the course of the hour. And it's going to be a great workout. That's 2 out of the 5 days a week. 3 of the days, I'm responsible for myself. I go in and sometimes he's there and I'll get some corrections from across the room while he's working with another client. Other times I won't, or he's not there. And it's up to me. No one's watching. And this isn't about doing a good deed for somebody else necessarily and wanting to attract attention. This is about actually being my word to him. And my word to him is I'm going to be there 5 days a week. I'm going to do 3 days of weight training, 2 days of cardio, and I'm going to play full out every time I'm there, whether or not you're there training me. And man, the temptation is there to just slack off because you don't have somebody pushing you. You don't have somebody encouraging you. But then there's this voice in my head that's like, but this is a promise you made to yourself. And so in this case, it's keeping my own word with me, not keeping my word with someone else. Nobody may be watching me. Nobody may be counting my reps. I could do 8 instead of 10. No one would know except me. And that's enough for me to feel out of integrity so that it's worth it for me to keep going because my word is worth something. And if that goes, at least in my set of values, if that goes, I got nothing. And so I'd encourage people to look at both sides of this coin. You want to do good for the sake of doing good because the deed itself is of intrinsic value. And you want to be your word even when no one's there to see you and force you because you want to be your word. This is at its core about your values and about having the integrity to carry them out, no matter who's watching or not watching.